The Spanish were ruled by Philip II, who had inherited Spain from his father, the Catholic Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, Austrian Habsburg, ruler of Central Europe, who had fought German Protestants between 1546 and 1555. One province of the Spanish Habsburg Empire was situated in the northeast of Europe, the Netherlands, that had been won over by the ideas of the Frenchman turned Swiss exile John Calvin. In 1566, the Spanish marched a large army under the leadership of the Duke of Alba north to quell what is known as the Dutch Revolt, that in turn attracted the sympathy of many European Protestants, including France and England. In England today, royal weddings are supposed to solve all of the country's problems. The French royal wedding of August 1572 was no different. It was supposed to bring French Catholics and Protestants together again in a war in the Netherlands against Spain. This is probably what provoked the massacre of St. Bartholomew's Day, although the jury is still out on this. By Catholics in France who wanted to avoid a war with Spain, which was the most powerful, if not the most Catholic country in Europe at the time. The campaign was to be led by Admiral de Coligny, the most prominent Protestant military leader in France, who was the first victim of St. Bartholomew's Day massacre. The prime suspect was the Duke of Guise, whose father was thought to have been killed by Coligny's order in 1563. After the massacre, the Duke of Guise became the figurehead of the French Catholics who opposed the Crown's policy of compromise, and he started a journey that would lead him to ask for the direct intervention of Spain. Across the Channel, Elizabeth I had avoided very wisely to get involved up to that point, in spite of her more Protestant subjects, mostly within the House of Parliament, who asked her to come to the Dutch Protestants' help. After the massacre of St. Bartholomew's Day, that was celebrated in Rome by a commemorative medal, she could no longer sit idly, while countries at the very edge of her kingdom were under threat to be overcome by the Spain. After 1572, she covertly helped Henry of Navarre, who after Coligny's death had become the leader of the French Protestants and the Dutch rebels against Spain by allowing the Dutch sea beggars, pirate ships, to dock in English ports. The crisis worsened in 1584, when the son and heir to the throne of the French king Henry III died, and the Protestant Henry of Navarre, a prince of royal blood, was declared to be the legal successor to the French crown. The French Catholics then openly rebelled against the legitimate King of France and formed a coalition of barons around the Duke of Guise, called the Holy Catholic League, openly asking for the assistance of King Philip II of Spain. If they had been successful and Spain had controlled France and the Netherlands, it was clear that England would be next on the list. English Protestants who had been nursed by the grisly stories of the persecution of Bloody Mary, wife to Philip II of Spain, could not tolerate such a fate. The Cold War between England and Spain became hot in 1587 when Elizabeth asked Mary, Queen of Scots, to be executed, years after she'd been imprisoned. The defeat of the Spanish Armada in 1588 was largely due to adverse weather conditions prevailing in the Channel and around the British Isles. It was a crucial moment for the development of English national identity, to be matched only by the valiant resistance of the British Royal Air Force to the German war machine in the Battle of Britain in the summer of 1940. To cross the Channel the other way once again, I want to return to France to illustrate once more how the histories of England and France can be fruitfully compared during this period. Following the threat of a military coup by the Duke of Guise, with the support of the Spanish crown, the French King Henry III had him assassinated following the Estates General of Blois in 1588, only to be assassinated himself a year later by the monk Jacques Clément in 1589. This left France crownless, as most French Catholic subjects would not recognize the French Protestant leader Henry of Navarre as a legitimate heir to the throne, and a war of conquest of his own kingdom began for the future Henry IV. The first of a long line of Bourbon kings that ended only with the execution of Louis XVI in 1793, Henry IV could not conquer his kingdom without himself converting to Catholicism. His highly controversial conversion in 1593 was the price he had to pay for the crown. While he was besieging the capital city of the kingdom, he would have said, "Paris is worth a mass," although this was probably apocryphal, i.e. false. The war was not over for all that. In the years that followed, he gathered the bons Français, good Frenchmen, who were loyal to the French crown, irrespective of their Catholic or Protestant beliefs. He gathered them around his white panache, arguing that religious differences were nothing in the face of a Spanish invasion. The same applied around the same time to British subjects of Elizabeth I, and even her Catholic subjects in Lancashire would have resisted the plot of Jesuit missionaries that had crossed over from Ireland, that was considered from that time onward as a backdoor to England for a Spanish invasion. From resistance to a Spanish invasion by both Catholic and Protestant subjects in both England and France comes the idea that national identity was more important than religious belief. This makes nonsense of the traditional view that England belonged to a Protestant north and France to a Catholic south. In fact, both the French Gallican and the English Anglican churches, each in their own way, strove to find a compromise between Catholicism and Protestantism. But why the Elizabethan settlement was successful, the French kings failed to impose a religious compromise on their subjects. It was, however, politically expedient for both the French and English crowns to designate a common enemy, Spain, against which their Catholic and Protestant subjects could make common cause.